So, hello. It's a great honour to speak to Steve and Evan Strong. And in my opinion, they are Australia's best archaeologists. They keep finding amazing sites. They are real archaeologists, unlike the academics who are unfortunately hamstrung by their own ideas, their own concepts of their forefathers. But these guys are the real deal. And it's a pleasure to welcome them here. And Steve and Evan, hello. You've got some amazing stuff to talk to us about, I'm sure, as always. And I find your information mind-blowing. Please tell us about ancient Australia. What have you been up to?
Well, I've got to start by saying the introduction you've given from someone who's got a PhD is even more mind-blowing than what we've done. We rarely, if ever, get that reaction from anyone with a PhD. We've got a lot of other reactions, haven't we, Evan?
But this one's been a nice one, so I appreciate it.
It's been unique. What are we finding in Australia? To be honest, in a nutshell, literally everything. There's nothing that we've found. In fact, we have a rule from the time we've done this when elders contact us and when people approach us. If it doesn't fit into the traditional narrative of Australia, we're not interested in it. So we don't deal with stone tools that are tools because they were made by rock-on-rock technology and rock and stick and stone. We don't deal with that. We only deal with things where it's better than that. The technology in Australia is far more advanced. What we've learnt, whether it be 2 rings that were found at Hill End that contain within them metals that weren't used until the last century, and there are thousands of years old, and one was found 1 metre beneath the surface and 4 metres beneath the surface. They were made from metal. And they're ancient. And then we find, we've also found the rocks that we found have been looked at. I can tell you one rock that was by the other academic that's also got an open mind with a PhD, who said this was the most unique piece of archaeology he'd seen in the world. And he contacted the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian made it clear they wanted that rock because it didn't fit into anything they've seen. So when we say there's stuff in this country that doesn't fit, that's actually become the norm. And really what we're at the stage at, and the reason why, yes, some academics, in fact, 99% of them, know of our work and have got some particularly interesting things to say, none of which I'll repeat now. But what we're finding is that the narrative that they subscribe to, and that's not their fault. Okay, I know what schools are about. From the time you hit kindergarten, you were taught to memorize and recite. I'm sure you went through it too. I was a teacher and I fought it until I couldn't do any longer, but that's the way things are. So what we're finding is evidence of things found in this country that break every conceivable rule. Now I can give you just give one specific example, and it's not of the rings. It's not of the rocks. It's something that was found at Carryong. It was found not by us, but by Arnie Minnie Mace quite some time ago when virtually no one knew about the place. And she went there with Ray Johnson. And she found 2 objects and she gave them to us. One was a bone, which we've had looked at by a base hospital and a CAT scan. And they've told us it's an ancient human bone, which we know is Egyptian, because it's part of an Egyptian monument. But the second thing that was found was a metal piece that looks like aluminium. Now, what's interesting about that one particular piece of metal?
I'll go get it.
Oh, it's upstairs. Yeah, go up and get it. I didn't know I was going to talk about it because I never do know what I'm talking about. Go and get it quickly. I'll get to show people this. Let me tell you about this piece of metal. I got a friend I play tennis with that works at the major laboratory at Southern Cross Uni, and he runs the whole thing. There's 38 scientists there, and they pay him $2 million rent per year to the university. They work with the university. He's a legitimate scientist of the highest order, ladies and gentlemen. So when I tell you this story, I don't think I just found someone that had just gotten his Bachelor of Science and was looking for a job and said, I'll do this and get some money behind it. This guy works around the world, is accredited as a world expert. And I'm allowed to say his name. It's Graham Lancaster. So if anyone's doubting that, you can look this up. So this is just one piece of evidence that really shatters our conception of what was here. Now, it was found right next to hieroglyphs. And we know some ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs of 4,600 years. So yes, it would seem that bone, it was found next to the bone near a burial site. There's a tomb there, an 8-10 metre shaft. You would say it's Egyptian, wouldn't you? And you'd be right to think that. But we have a problem with this. Let me tell you, the analysis, when they took it to the laboratory, and it looks like aluminium, feels like aluminium, so they got the normal drill bit and it just slid off. They had to get a tungsten tip to break into this thing. And they couldn't believe how durable. It's like an aluminium can that's still here 4,600 years ago, but it's hard as steel. They couldn't work out why it was like that. It had been laying in the dirt for a long period of time. So anyway, they analysed it and it came out at 73% aluminium, 3% copper, and I'm going to say exactly what they told me, 24% of metal that they can't identify, that is not on the periodic table and has never been discovered. Now that means one of two things. That when this was made, they were using a metal that no one knows about to this day, or it's not from here. And that's made this metal, this aluminium, which is normally pretty easy to mess around with. You can't do a thing. You've got to get something, basically a diamond head or a tungsten tip to even make a mark on the damn thing. And we've got a picture to show people. When it comes up, we'll show you the mark they made. So it is legit. So here's the problem. Somebody could say, and I know there's a lot of people, mate, Charles, that actually are very skeptical and try and make up excuses for everything. It was made recently and made with some clever alloy that no one knows about, okay? And it was an experiment and it got lost. And of course, it got lost in the bush a long way from anywhere. Right, here it is. I'll hold it up.
Do you want me to hold it?
Oh, you better hold it up. I don't know how to do this. Hold it this way first and show them the clasp. Now that clasp, Auntie Minnie Mace tells us, her daughter wore that and it was complete. A complete clasp. So we know that it was jewelry. Now show them the other side, Evan. And they'll see the mark that was made when they cut into it. You see that one, Charles? You can see that cut on the side there.
Hold it back a bit, so it'll be It's a bit hard to see, but yeah.
Okay, so this is what we've got.
Trying to get it to focus. It's still focusing on our faces.
Right. Okay, so what we've got is this: 73% aluminium, 3% copper. Now that's unique. We've done some work on that. When we get the information, we find experts, or Evan does the work and then he hands it to me and I say, I've done it with him. And we found out that today, aluminium, when you've got that sort of number, it's around about 12%. 12 to 14% is what we do. But if you go back far enough, you'll find a time when it was between 2 to 4%. That's 3,000 years ago. So theoretically, if it was made here, it was made over 3,000 years ago with 1/4 substance that we don't know of. Now, the other problem is, yes, it was found next to the bone. It was found next to the glyphs. It was found beside the shaft. It was beside all those things, which are Egyptian, for sure. But you go to Egypt and look for bauxite mines, and where there's a deposit of bauxite, there isn't any. But it was found, I'm sure, that the son of Khufu, Nefertari, was wearing it. But think about this. Some part of that alloy has not come from this planet. I would think in the case of Egypt, I would not be surprised if it's Syrian, whereas Australia is Pleiadian. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I'm not saying which part of the non-Earth selection it comes from, because I don't know that. But what I can tell you is I still play tennis with Graham, and he asked me time after time after time, has mainstream yet acknowledged the fact that that artifact that Evan's trying to show you right now is unique on this planet, and the camera won't focus on it. Don't, Evan, you're going to scare people if you keep doing this. So, Paul, there's one example, one specific scientific example of an artifact we found. Now, the bone I know is Egyptian, and I'm happy for mitochondrial DNA to be done on it, but we won't go into the reasons why, but I'm not allowed to have a test done on any bone I've got. I'll get locked up in jail for 3 years if I take it outside this door. We won't go into the stories with that. That's the compromise, so I don't go to jail at the moment. So we know we've got this, but the government has said you cannot have it analysed. Now, all we want to do is mitochondrial DNA, optically stimulated luminescence. We want that sort of stuff done on the skulls we've got and all that sort of stuff. But the government and the authorities have seen it in their wisdom that we can do none of that on all of the stuff we've got. Now, I would say to you that this object we've got right now, found as it was at Carillon, where a lot of people say there's an Egyptian link there, is absolute proof that if it's not Egyptian, then it's even further away than that because it's not from here. So that's probably one of the many reasons we have actually 3 different artifacts that have scores that vary from 41.8% unidentified on this planet, used by electronic means with a machine that cost over nearly $100,000 that analyzes each piece of metal down to, I think, 0.01%. And on one object we've got there, 41.8% doesn't come up on the periodic table.
Hey, Steve,
now, my point is...
I've never seen metal that looks like that object before. And
nor have they. Actually, it's funny because Graham was begging me for permission to analyse it. And I said, I can't give that to you because I've got to ask Auntie Minnie May. She gave it to me as a protection. And we certainly need it, haven't we?
Yes.
They didn't know that. Thank you, Auntie Minnie. But I couldn't give him permission for something was passed on to me by an elder, even though the elder gave it to me, because in an old way, it still belongs to her too. So I had to get permission off her. So he looked at that metal and said, I don't know what that is. I'd love to get it analysed. But I got to tell you, when he come back with the readout, he was more stunned than he was when he looked at it. Because to begin with, he just couldn't understand why they couldn't cut the damn thing until they used whatever device they used is for the strongest metals they have. So if this was known of today, I can tell you, whoever invented this metal, they'd be using it, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
That's the point. For anyone that says, oh, it's been done recently, for God's sake, if it's this good, it would strengthen aluminium to the strength of steel, for God's sake. They'd be using it, man. Don't worry. And it's 1/4 in here, and it's made a completely different alloy that's unique. I mean, this object, obviously, if we wanted to sell it, we could sell it for a lot of money because there's nothing like it. But then that would not be good archaeology, would it? And it would also, because it was given to us by an elder, we'd probably be sung to death for it. So there's a couple of good reasons for not selling it, and both of them are equally convincing.
Yep.
So yes, what people have got to understand is in this country, you have a narrative in the universities and the schools that is so wrong. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that every site we've been to, we only go there when an elder contacts us and invites us onto country and wants to share the real story of Australia. So we don't go wandering around for looking at things, because that would be bad if you're an original person, as I am, because you can't go onto country unless you're invited. So when we go, it's not hard for us to do archaeology, because when we get asked, then they just hand it to us. So people who think that we do wander through the countryside a lot, finding nothing, but all this stuff we've got was given to us. The skulls were given to us. This thing here was given to us, normally by original people. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it isn't. And the reason they give it to us is they probably have tried to give it to other people with PhDs, but on every occasion they were rebutted. We've always got these objects on the rebound, haven't we?
Yeah,
that's something that people need to understand. They come to us because they know we'll honour what they give us, but they've been to other people first. Even that rock the Smithsonian went to, that woman Ros Mulder went to all the universities, and they all said, no, it's not for me. Couldn't be done here. And I can tell you, should I tell him what the official explanation is from the Australian Museum? Would you like to hear this?
Oh, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am not making this up. You can ring Ros Mulder because she's the one who told me this.
Yes, we haven't said this story in a while, actually.
Oh, no, I haven't. I've got to cook a straight face for this.
Yeah.
Okay. We did it. We invited the Australian Museum to come along, and all the universities, and they did come. The Australian Museum, we know, they came, they looked at the rocks and they ran away. They never made contact with us. Anyway, Ros contacted them and showed the rock to them and the rebuttal. And by the way, this lady actually did threaten to take me to court for slandering, didn't she?
Oh, the museum lady.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
And I said, mate, I was told by her, she can't lie, she's autistic. She'll find that out. Ros is autistic. Autistic people have a gift. They can't lie. So she's ready. She'll put the stat deck. She'll go to court. Let's do it. And we didn't. This is what she said happened. That rock we showed you before with the amazing marks. Oh, hundreds of them, all intersections. And the major mark there is 33 degrees, and it was found at Carrion, which is 33 degrees, and it's a sacred number anyway. She said, no, it can't be made by original people because 6-stone bone technology won't do it. It was brought here. It came from Africa. Now, don't forget, it was found 1.5 meters beneath the surface in sandstone at Carrion, which is around about 15,000 years at least. But she said it was dropped on the surface, but it wasn't. There were 8 people who saw it brought out, and she knows that, but no. And what happened was an African that came here, I don't know why she said this, just after the First World War, but that's what she claims. Remember, we had the white Australian policy at the time, but that might be tricky. But somehow they snuck in. Slightly dark, but they got here. Original people at that particular time were all locked up and counted as kangaroos, but they got in. And wandering through the bush in Carrion, he dropped it. And it was left there, and then she picked it up.
And then magically, in less than, about 70 years, a whole bunch of dirt fell on top of it.
Yes, that's right. It was a landslide that fell on top of it. That's why it's 1.5 meters beneath the surface. But unfortunately, where Carrion is, it's 170 meters high. It's the highest point around, and is above Gosford. You've got to climb up this massive hill, and the house site where she is on the top of the hill. And there's a landslide of 1.5 meters that came over that in the last 70 years, which means rocks fall up a hill and then land in one spot where the rock was dropped. That was the official explanation given by Australian Museum. And that person, I won't use her name, rang me up and said she was going to take me to the court because I said that, and it was told by someone else. That is the best that mainstream can come up with. And from that point, it's either been 5 different threats to put me in jail from the government. I've now got an ASIO agent full time, and the academics write nicely about us in some email thing. I forget what it's called, but it's a group where a lot of academics get together and basically attack us constantly. So that's the academic side of Australia at the moment. But the real story is, Charles, that this country has a history that's unique. And it's the beginning of everything. And that's the part that I think is sad.
Wow, yeah. Indeed. It's so true what you say about the academics. They are truly blinded by their own concepts, which they just come up with, and then they assume they're true, and they apply them to the whole earth and to all space and time. But, reality is more complex, as you guys are uncovering.
That's the major point here. Like, you take... Really good example is you look at the stereotype image of the Neanderthal that we're all taught. You would have been taught this too. And he's stooped over, he's dribbling, he's got hair all over his face.
Might have a club.
Might have a, no, probably not. Yeah, but the people know that is based on the first Neanderthal ever found, and he's called Old Man. Now, obviously he's going to be slightly smaller. The reason he was stooped is because he was severely arthritic. Now, that became the Bible in all the schools, didn't it, of what Homo Neanderthal looked like, because he was bent down like that. The one they found was about 75, arthritic to buggery, really badly so, and obviously was smaller. They've now found so many Neanderthals. I was reading recently now, they've got so many bones now, they've worked out that the Neanderthal teenagers reach puberty before Homo sapien teenagers do, right? That they are not stooped, they're completely upright like we are today. Yeah, they're slightly stockier than us, and they may be slightly smaller, but what people don't get is their brain size is larger than ours. But lo and behold, you read the traditional narrative about how Homo sapiens conquered and defeated. That's the words that are used, aren't they? And they'll tell you straight away, because we were smarter. That's a basic part of it, isn't it? But now we found out, that's what we were told, and that's what I was taught, and I'm sure that's what you were taught even at uni. Now we found out, since the Denisovans, which have a brain size larger than ours again, that there are now 12 different hominins. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to depict them with the same body and the same face, don't do that. Some are taller than others, just like sapiens. Oh, yes.
Here's the newest one.
Here's the newest one that just turned up in China. Stringer said he has got a huge head. Guess what it's bigger than? Ours again.
Us.
Yeah, bigger than sapiens by a long time. He said you could put the sapien brain inside that with room around it. He said it is a huge head. Now, Stringer is a well-known archaeologist, right? So therefore, he's part of the pack. He's telling us that. That article tells us, says in there, we've got to rewrite the whole history of humanity. It's all wrong. What one scientist said, we just did a paper on a paper on 7 other papers. What another scientist said is not a human tree of evolution. It's a dense, intertwined bush. And there's lines going everywhere. And what we found out is we put the sapiens on the top. Well, look, I'll hold one up now. This thing here, which looks so primitive, that way and that way. Look at the skull on the back. It's bigger than ours. So that means when we think about, and of course you do know about this one, the no forehead skull, which has a completely different form skull than ours, way bigger. And by the way, when you look at the full size of that, and we've had it reconstructed, that's the skull it has. No, there's no forehead. It's all back here, and it is a massive skull. That's about 1,700 cc. Now, what we found is the story that our academics prosecute, that there's a paper we've got there that I reviewed, which is about how we killed the lot of them.
There you go.
This one here, another one, 9 species. Now there's just one. Did we kill the rest? No, it's not 9. Since he wrote this, they found 4 more. And they haven't included our one, which is 13 species. Now, the trick we found is if you put them in brain size, we're coming 6 out of the 13. We're not the top of the class. We're not even near the top of the class. We're sitting in the middle, and only just because all of these other species have got a bigger head than us. So therefore, when we look at the traditional story about how we evolved in Africa 250,000 years ago, they've changed that 750,000 years ago. I'm going backwards. Well, it's not actually Africa, is it? No, it's Siberia. A hominid in Siberia is 9 million years old, and they've only got 4. Oops. Oh, and then there's 2 in Greece and Bulgaria that's 7 million years old. All of their story is wrong. But you know what? I'd like it if they would actually come out and make a public announcement that primarily the history of humanity, we've got it wrong, not just a little bit, but completely. And that, to me, is really the important story in this, that it's coming bit by bit. But I don't know if you listened to the very start of you were on a show with us earlier with Leonard, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you listened to the start of what we did at the very beginning of that one. You probably came in later through it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I wanted to actually explain something. He does know this, but probably not why. But explain why we're doing a show, as you know. Is it next Sunday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all speaking.
Yeah, okay. We're doing this show together, and what's it called, Evan?
Mounds and Monuments.
Yeah.
And
you probably know this, but you probably don't know why it's called Mounds, Monuments and Zebras. You probably didn't quite get how that came about. So maybe because you're on the show, it would only be right. I mean, the viewers, if they want to have a cup of tea, they can while we're doing this, but I need to explain because Charles is going to be gone, and we promised him it was going to be called Mounds and Monuments, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we put through the zebras in, and you probably wondered occasionally, well, how does that get into that? Need to explain why we did that. You see, we asked Leonard to role play. I won't ask you to role play because it's a bit silly, and we had fun doing it. And he was a zebra, and so was I. And the reason we did this was I said that quantum physicists say there's 11 different sort of realities at the same time. And I said, I want to move one across because I don't believe, this is my theory, that humans have genetics that are solely from this planet, okay? And therefore I said, I want to have another reality where there's no aliens and no interference like that. And therefore I didn't put humans on the equation. And I made zebras the dominant species on the planet. Okay, so Leonard was a zebra and so was I. But in this planet, there are 2 problems. Number 1, we don't believe in TV. We do all by radio. So Leonard had to describe himself, and he did. And what did he sort of say? And what are the sort of things when he describes it? We gave him a zebra to look at to make it fair. We didn't want to make it hard for him.
We talked about how he looked, and he had a bit of a mane and some stripes and whatnot.
He went on about his stripes and the different stripes, didn't he?
It was pretty impressive.
And he was going well with that. And I had to break in and explain to him, it's an ultimate reality on this planet, and it's 100 years behind us. And the word black, they hate it. They don't like black people. Therefore, there's no kneeling here, mate. Therefore, the zebras realised this, and they're very good at genetics. So they took the colour black out of them. They're all white. And then we found out something, that when you did that, there was no way of distinguishing any zebra from any other zebra because they all look basically the same, right? And this is the point we tried to make. And this is what we're going to talk about a lot. We'll just do a little snippet of it now because I want to make sure even if people don't get on the day, I still want them to understand this. That if you go through nature's rule, when they make zebras, they primarily are made about the same height, the same weight, and their faces are basically the same. There are minor differences between. Now, if you do foxes, you get the same deal. The colouring might change, but I took the colour out by saying everyone's white because I hate the word black there. They're all racist. And even the black fellas don't want to be black. Yeah, that still happens today, strangely enough. We had to make it real. It had to be like it is here, otherwise it wouldn't work. But the point I was making is if you go through any animal, and even if it goes down to the insects and the fish, their faces are made the same. But there's one animal on this planet, its genetic pattern is the diverse of that, where you've got 7 billion of them and no two faces are the same. Now, my point has been in that, if you think about it, what have you got? You've got a forehead? Well, hang on. No, you don't, because one of those doesn't have a forehead. So we'll leave that out. Okay, leave the forehead out. You've got 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, and a chin. Hang on. We've got to leave the chin out now. I don't know if you know this, but in China, they found a new species of Homo sapien that doesn't have a chin. Now, my question is this. What is going on with hominins? Because it's hominins now, and there's plenty of them, and one doesn't have a chin, one doesn't have a bloody head. I've got a different head going backwards. What is going on with our genes that is opposed to our ancestor, the chimp? Because when you look at chimps today, they still basically have the same. But humans can be half a metre, they can be 2.5 metres. They can weigh 40 kilos, 400. We've got different coloured eyes, we've got different fingerprints. Everything about our genes is the opposite of every other being here. It doesn't make sense. But if you take this thing without a forehead, that's different. And then when you look at the one we've got reconstructed, look at the eyes, look at the nose, and then I'll hold up a sapien alongside it. And you'll see the nose shape is completely different. The eyes are much bigger. The back of the jaws are different. Look at the way the two heads go. They go in different directions. If you put these 2 sets of genes together, then you can start to get differences because you're merging complete opposites. Larger brain, bigger head. And by the way, this one here has a humerus of 45, at least 45 centimetres. Ours is 30. Different body. You start mixing beings off-world because that's only one species. We're talking about Pleiadians here, right? Not doing Syrians and all the other mob. You put all that together and you blend it into the one of the 15 or 20 different hominids that were around that best takes your genes, and they obviously didn't pick the Denisovans, the poor buggers. They picked us. That's why we prevailed, because we were the, how can I put it? We were the experiment. And what they were trying to do, we're not going to talk about today. There was a plan with this experiment and a reason for it. But if we told them that today, no one's going to come to the actual show, are they?
Yeah, we do want them to come on the weekends,
yeah,
don't we?
We will get to that. But my point in this story is about the zebras, and we do it in more detail. And if anyone's heard the story now, forget it, because there's more humorous on the day, but I killed the jokes earlier. But the point is this. There's nothing about the massive divergence of hominins when we're supposed to have come from a monkey mummy and a monkey daddy that all have sagittal keels, and they gave birth to children that have sutures so their brains can get bigger. That for me is an issue, but the bigger issue is that our monkey mummy and daddy still look the same. And we look like everything. So for us, the big issue is, the part that I don't get is science. When we talk about our genetic story, we don't compare ourselves to everything else. If we compared ourselves to a different species of owl, we'd find it's the same damn face. Mm. But our faces are so different from one another. And then you change our skin color, and then look at the other part. All animals eat roughly the same types of food. What do we eat? Anything. We can eat anything. So we are not of the same genetic pattern. So because you're coming on, and we are also going to obviously talk about monuments, standing monuments, because for us, those monuments were nearly always directed to the sky as above. And some of those monuments have stories that we were given. From our point of view, the dreaming is a philosophical statement that comes out of the original people and the Pleiadians in partnership with each other. And that's another point I'd like to make in this too, Charles, and we make this point often, that I don't want you to think that when the Pleiadians came here, that we were less than them. I believe we were the equal of them, because, look, we weren't the smartest species here, because there's some bloody smart hominids running around at the same time. But I believe we were the most magical, the most spiritual. And I believe, and I've been told through the dreaming, the reason they chose the original people, because they were living a very spiritual lifestyle and they wanted to learn from them. We've been told that they went back and started to live the old way original people lived and never went through the skies again, because they wanted to learn from us too. So this was a combination of two species that were put together to create, is it the Gospel of Adam?
Yes.
The Gnostic Gospels. When Eve spoke to Adam, and Eve said to Adam that we could be greater than the gods that created us. And of course, people have got to understand, original gods have a different name. They're called sky heroes. They come from the sky. So when we go to sort of like a mound we're going to look at a bit, which is the Standing Stone site, that's mainly a story about them coming here. And that's what these mounds are. They're so important because they're part of the legacy of the beings that started to work with us in combination to create an experiment that had a use-by date. Yeah, we'll talk about that a bit too, won't we?
Wow. Yeah, that's something absolutely incredible. Yeah, I love how you talked about creating a speech. So this is a new interpretation of the Adam and Eve story. That Adam and Eve, would you say they're two different hominids coming together to create another one?
That's where it gets interesting. That's where it gets interesting, because you've got the story where you've got the rib that comes into here. Now, how did Adam put the rib into Eve unless there's something going on a genetic scale to begin with? Because that would mean that one of those species was different to the other. So it's really hard to tell. Then you've got the role of the serpent. Now, what does the serpent offer Eve? Wisdom. Remember that? And then somehow or other, God gets the shits because Eve is going to learn wisdom. Well, we're sent here for. We're incarnated on this planet. So what we get from that story, I mean, you look at Paul Wallace, how he talks about the Old Testament. It's all about aliens being there, okay? He doesn't deny a God, nor do I, and they don't deny a creator too. But what is Adam even about? Because remember, in Australia, we have one universal story for all original people. It's the only story that transcends every tribe, which is the seven sisters from where? The Pleiades. That's where they came, and they came down here. And then we have stories about Orion chasing the girls, sometimes with a not such good intent, Evan.
Sometimes he's just the jilted lover, and sometimes he's a bit hands-on.
Sometimes he's very rapey.
Yeah.
So he's all the way between all those things. That changes, okay? That part changes. But there's two things that don't. That the seven sisters were women, Adam and Eve, right? And they came onto this planet and they had children. So is there a correlation of the two? Oh, shit, yeah. Who was the first woman to have the child? Well, that would be Eve, wouldn't it? And then you've got this story where there's the wisdom, but who's offering the wisdom? The serpent. And that serpent, you've got the serpent myth, as you know, Charles, it's in every country on the planet, whether it's a dragon or a serpent doesn't. And often they fly, don't they? Right? And they hide in water, which is really all the sort of things dragons aren't supposed to do. But that's a myth because it's based in a fact, which has been misunderstood over a period of time. So was the serpent a Pleiadian involved in this? And was that tree, was it representative genes or not? All those things can be read into it if you read the Dreaming with it. But the one thing we do know is there's not a tribe in Australia that doesn't know the Seven Sisters story, and it's a woman's story. Now, if we want someone to tell that story in detail, a man could talk about it in general terms because every tribe has it. But if you wanted to talk about it in detail, he couldn't speak about it. That would have to come from the woman. And whether a name, I don't know the name of the Seven Sisters, whether the first one was called Eve, another one Lilith, we don't know. But I think it's quite possible that's how it happened. The woman with the man from here. I'm pretty sure that's the way it took place. So all those stories, like we said, are always based in fact. Which is why we're going to read them.
Wow, yeah. That's incredible. That Adam and Eve story is absolutely amazing, and I believe, unfortunately, it's a very condensed story. If only we had the full version, you know.
Very important because look, the Gnostics did keep some of that version. Mm-hmm. Right? I was just talking about Adam and Eve was the revealer.
She even had her own gospel, but they've only got about 2 sentences left that weren't destroyed. Mm. So there's about 2 sentences of her gospel.
The Gospel of Mary.
Gospel of Eve.
The Gospel of Eve, yeah. And the Gospel of Eve. The Gospel of Eve has a saying in there that comes straight out of the Dreaming. You know the one, don't you?
Yeah.
In the Gospel of Eve, the same soul we have is shared by fish, by birds, by animals, by trees, and by rocks. Now that's the Dreaming. And that comes from the Gospel of Eve. Now, most of that was destroyed, but those couple of sayings were kept behind. That one to me is seminal because that really does make Gnosticism a very close, a genuine replication of the Dreaming into that area because it's all, I mean, Gnostic Gospels, they say that common, that's written in Pistis Sophia, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Where they say the same soul that makes you, makes the animals and makes no distinction between the fish, the birds, the animals and humans. In fact, in the Gospel of Pistis Sophia, I think humans came third. They weren't even first. Wow. So yes, that I believe is where the old stories come from. They come from the Dreaming. I mean, the Dreaming has a story of the first flood and a black fella going around in a canoe and picking up people on the islands when it came. So there's nothing there. I believe when you look at Genesis and you look at the Dreaming, there's so much in common. I mean, even in Genesis, they admit the fact. They said they were giants in those days. We know that. All black fellas know that. I mean, you still got a couple walking around with the Yowies. They're not the big giants. They're the medium-sized giants. Well, bigger than that. But everybody knows that was true. Oh, except the universities and the schools and the academics.
That's amazing that you made the connection with the Dreaming because it does show that the Gnostic Gospels are genuine and very old because the academics say these Gospels are made up in the 3rd century or 4th century. But I've also found that the Gospels that have been excluded are actually full of ancient technology, and the Gospels they keep are just a bit more simplistic, and they tell a cleaner story.
Yeah, they do. And people have got to remember, the Gospels were chosen by 20 appointed bishops by Constantine, who had just finished wiping out another army and smiting his enemy. And he made sure this fit into a male sensibility and divide and conquer with rulership from above. It was fashioned that way The reason there were more gospels and apocryphals and all sorts of writings that were taken out than that were left in. There was so much that was taken out. Anything that acknowledged women was taken out. The Gospel of Thomas, which that Dan Brown film was about, it being hidden for so long, that one could have been written by Thomas. None of the 4 Gospels were actually written by the disciple that was there at the time. None. That you've got to remember that Luke was following someone that had never seen Jesus, was actually killing Christians for a long time, then decided not to. Luke was a disciple of them, and he claimed his word was the perfect word. That they chose. The ones they didn't choose, like Thomas and obviously Mary, and obviously Dialogue of the Saviour, those things were completely different. And in those Gospels, it becomes obvious. In the Gospel of Thomas, Mary said to Jesus, "What are your followers like?" And he said, "They're like children in a field that don't know where they live." Didn't include her as a follower. If you look at the Dialogue of the Saviour, she stands above the rest and gives most of the revelations, not Jesus. And all Jesus says is, "You're much smarter than anyone else here." I mean, the Gospel of Philip, they were complaining because Jesus was also kissing Mary on the mouth, and they got upset about that and wanted to know, why do you love her more than you love all of us? And the saying was really, the reply was really revealing. It said, you are all like blind people in a box that's covered with no light. And when the light comes, you don't see the light. But her eyes were open already. Yours are not. That is why I love her more. So it wasn't just a physical thing. He kept making the comment time after time. It's his wife. They're a pair. Now, in original society, the same thing happened. Like we had a clever fella that was our custodian, our teacher, which was Kano. He had a wife. She knows more about clever fella stuff than any other male. And that's the way it was in the past, ladies and gentlemen. The original people who've got this idea of men's business and women's business being separate. No, when the men are doing a ceremony, the women are doing one close by. They just can't hear each other. There's always a sacred men's site where there's a women's site and vice versa, but they're not together. It was always together. The women, basically, even when a boy was being cut in the penis, that could only happen when a grandmother came up that knew the boy and whispered who that boy was going to marry and gave him permission to cut the boy. Did that happen? And in Tasmania, when it got severe near the finish, it was a woman who was circumcising the men. People have got to remember that. So when we talk about Jesus and Mary being a pair, that's very much the old way stuff. And of course, the Pope got in and made it the opposite, and it became men only. That's not a religion. That's a men's story, and the women are essential in any proper religion. And that's what the dreaming had. It had women's magic and men's magic, and all the men knew the same thing. Evan, which magic is more powerful?
Women's magic.
Every man knows that. They fear women's magic more than men's magic. When you have a religion that understands that and makes their magic stronger than ours, then you have equality.
I mean, to the extent there was a clever woman up here that the men of higher degree would go see, and they'd have to climb up this cliff into a cave and then spend a couple of months with her.
She was teaching them to be women, Kadija men. What was the final test, Evan?
You had to step out of the cave and then levitate in midair or fall to your death and die. And that was the
ceremony.
That was the ceremony. But mind you, the ones that didn't make it, she'd catch them at the last minute.
Catch them when they're down on the bottom. She'd catch
just
them
before they hit the ground.
And then send them off. There was no shame in them failing, because this was the strongest ceremony. But notice, and everyone knows this story, the woman was up in the cave and skilled the men in the finer arts. There's a story, the first white woman that lived with original woman. Her name's Diane Bell. It's called Daughters of the Dreaming. And she sat with them, and she stayed with them for about 18 months, not 2 weeks. So she got to learn. And near the finish, they pointed to a clever fella. He said, "See that one over there?" And she said, "Yeah." Of all of them, we might select him and we might teach him a little bit of our women's magic. So you see the difference here. When you have a religion like that, and when you have Jesus and Mary together, that's the dreaming both ways. White way, black fella way, it still works out the same. That's proper Wiritchin.
Wow, that's yeah, incredible. Yeah. So, what other information do you have to share with us on the same or a different topic?
Yeah, well, there's one that came to mind. There's a story. You haven't seen her work yet. You will on Sunday. And we're trying something different because, as you probably know, we've been very, very strong on doing science, getting empirical evidence. That was actually given to me as a role by my elder when this started. I didn't decide I'm going to wander off to all these tribes. I got that right from Kano, and everyone knows that in Australia. And I was told to get white fella evidence, which is what I do, okay? And that's why the academics have such an issue with us. But this they would love, wouldn't they? Mm-hmm. Oh, they're going to kill me for this. they're salivating when they hear what I've endorsed, fully endorsed. Okay, as you probably know, we're quite of the belief that aliens were involved in what's taking place, and they were involved at Uluru at the ceremony, which we will talk about briefly in that change. Now, what I wanted to do is we work with a person, Leah, who, oh God, this gets hard every time I say this, because I never believed in channeling, honestly. I thought it was dodgy. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This woman, when we first met her, she said she was in contact with an alien called Mesref, who's very high up and lives on this planet with a lot of different aliens in Norway somewhere, and there's some down in Antarctica, as we know, and they are heavily involved in what was taking place on the 21st, the whole thing. And she said she was in contact with him. Now, I met her. I saw her talk once, and she did a fantastic talk. It was better than ours. And I then thought, yeah, well, we'll find out about this. So what I've done over a period of time, I would ask her questions that she couldn't know. I had a rational, empirical mind. Look, you're an academic. Don't tell me you haven't got one there. It's still hiding in there. You can't get rid of it if you go that far. It's trained. So you've got to be skeptical. And I was skeptical. And I'd ask a question she could not answer. I must have done this for 6 months. I kept thinking there could be a way that could have been guessed. Maybe I picked up from something else. And I asked her something. I can't remember what it was now, where I thought this will prove it one way or the other. The answer I got back told me that and told me the reason why it happened, which I didn't understand until then. I thought to myself, and I figured out that was why it happened. I thought, no, I'm going to stop fighting with this. She is in contact. Now, Mesref was involved. I don't know who was in that UFO we filmed on at Uluru, but there was someone there for sure, and we've proved that. And that's in our earlier episode. If people want to see that, they can still buy it. And we proved there that was actually a UFO going across there. And I got more information we found since then I'm going to mention in the next one. Absolute proof it was a UFO. Not giving that away today, of course. But getting back to Leah, I decided I would ask a series of questions that I said, take a pen and a paper when you ask these questions and write them down. And we'll do a question and answer. And what I'm saying to people at the start is I believe this lady has been in contact with Mesref since she's been about, 6, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
constant. And it's like a raw telephone. She can pick the phone up and get an answer, well, unless he's angry with her. And the interesting thing is the information she gets off him, more than 50% of the time, is not wanted. Is it, Evan? Mm. In fact, it's the opposite of what she wants to do. So it's not as if she's channeling stuff she wants to hear. It's often what she doesn't want to hear. But I asked her 8 questions. And I'm going to make the same offer of the one we're doing. We leave it open for people from the that are actually buying tickets to send through email, not on the day, because that's too late, 2 questions to make it 10. And we'll ask them on the day before. Now, I've written up my 8 questions from last time. And we did some the first time. And it was mainly about the ceremony. But what I am going to say is we had a major problem, didn't we, Evan, when we were doing it live. We were getting sort of cutouts every
Oh, yeah,
10 seconds.
Yeah. It was buffering too much, which can happen, but this was the worst time
It was in the
I've ever seen
lockdown.
it. And as the day went by, it got worse and worse. Mind you, to everyone that watches replay, it's fine.
Yeah.
It was just for the poor people that were there in the day. Because usually if you press refresh, it works. But
not this time.
No.
We're not sure why. But what was interesting was I heard parts of the answer that she wrote down. And that's some of the deepest stuff I've ever heard. It was outside her pay scale. And I wasn't rude. I said to her later, I said, mate, you couldn't think of this. And she said, oh, God, no. I had no idea about any of this. I don't know this. It was really something like when I called it a royal telephone, this being is so close to being utterly advanced it isn't funny. And the wisdom in the replies I got was way past what I expected. I'm going to sit down one day, because I never watch myself, but I'm going to sit down one day and just write down the stuff he said. It was stunning. It really was. This time around, I've got 8 questions, and I decided eventually I wanted to keep this out, but I did ask one question about COVID. I couldn't help myself. I just couldn't leave it alone. But we try to keep away from that stuff a lot. We don't want to talk about that. But I've done my questions this time around. We're leaving it open for 2 other people, but it sounds so hard to vindicate or validate, which it is. I can't prove to anyone that she's in contact. She could be making this up. But if you listen to what was said, you wouldn't think so. I just thought to myself, God, that was it's just not what I could think about, not what she could think about. And every time, these were questions I didn't have an answer to. And because most times he's fairly cryptic, but he's not being that cryptic this time. It's clear what he said. You should try and have a listen. If you listen to one of them, you'll keep listening. And we're going to continue doing that. That's what I'm leading up to. Because in these times we've got, which are the most turbulent that have ever existed, because in the next couple of years before the change is complete, because that did succeed at Uluru, things will get worse. And people have got to remember that if you think the idea of following what the Hopi, the Navajo, the Inuit, the Mayans and the original people say about a change that took place on the 21st, if you think it's rubbish, if you think it's ridiculous, and what would they know? I'd like to remind them that we had an incident about 5 years ago, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. No, maybe 6 years ago.
I'm trying to work out which one you're hinting at.
Oh, the one where Arnie Minnie was asked, when will the change begin?
Oh, that one, yes.
Because the elders knew about this for quite some time. That ceremony we did Uluru, they've been going on for 9 years leading up to that one. And the reason they closed down the rock and threw everyone out for 2 days full is because they didn't want anyone to see it. It was so sacred. But all that old fellas know and old women know, this change is coming, it's begun. But the question that was asked at the time, and we were there, Evan was there, and some other people, Nina and Lavinia, 2 of our friends were there, was what would be the first sign of the change? And Arnie Minnie May said, oh, that's easy. She said, you're not going to believe this. There will be a run around the world on toilet paper. She said, people will be fighting in the aisles. They'll be selling it. The people will be stealing it. They'll riot over toilet papers first. She said, when that happens, the change is beginning. Now, I would ask you to go back and find anyone that made a prediction 5 years ago that the run, when we have a pandemic, it's not food, it's not oranges, it's not medicine, but toilet paper will go first. And I remember walking down a supermarket aisle in the middle of that when there was a full-time security guard just on the toilet paper, and he was sitting by his chair and he was staring at the empty shelves, but guarding the empty shelves for when it came next. And I thought to myself, the world has gone crazy. That man is now guarding an empty space where there's nothing there. Now, who would have guessed that would be the first sign? The old ones did. The indigenous people of this planet knew about this. The Mayans spoke of 2 roads. We've got a new quote from the Hopi, haven't we?
Yeah. From
another one about the 7, the 2 ways. White Eagle, talking about the fact is the other group we're going to read is about the fast-flowing river that you must dive into. You must do this on faith. They've said it's begun. Now it has begun. The ceremony was successful. There were 15 million people around the planet meditating on the 21st of December at 7:32. And we did turn the rock on, and we've got pictures of the explosion that took place at Uluru. We've got all that proof, and we've shown it in the last one. So if people want to see that, they can. Now we talk about it without proving it, because if people don't believe it, they can go back and have a look. My point is that what we're up to now, this is the period where people have got to make a decision about whether they want to keep walking down the path that's been given to them or make a new one. So that's why I wanted to talk to the elders up there. The ones who, by the way, you've got to ask yourself, why did they come? And they'll tell you, for the 21st of December at Uluru, on the chance that it might work. Now remember, we've told people, we told it, Charles, in the last 5 years, we've been telling people about this, and we've told them there would be a pandemic. I didn't think it was going to be as bizarre as it was, insofar as it doesn't really kill people, but scares the crap out of them. But I knew it was going to come. And we also knew that wars were going to come. And that's what they're setting up to do now.
Steve,
it will happen.
Can I interrupt you and ask?
Yeah.
So this to me sounds like the tradition worldwide of changes happening every millennium. So what happened last year was the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And in ancient astrology, that happens once a millennium, very close. So 2 instances ago, Jesus happened, and Jesus was a king predicted to come because there were changes happening at that time too, and that's early Christianity. And so if it relates to the millennium, how did the Aborigines come about this information? Did they get it? Is there an Aboriginal calendar, or how do they get this information?
It's a good question, actually.
It's a great question. The answer is so difficult because it was such a convoluted way we got the information of different people at different times. It was never a complete delivery. In fact, in every presentation we gave, we warned people we were not convinced it would even happen. It was that secretive. When you went up there, virtually no one knew about it. No one knew they were going to shut down the park until 10 o'clock in the morning, when they just kicked everyone out and gave some bogus reason, which everyone said was a lie, because they weren't going to tell the truth. We don't know. We really don't know. And why? It's not only just that there was a conjunction of Jupiter-Saturn, it linked in with the solstice too at the same time, within a couple of hours of each other, which made it even stronger from both sides of the equation. And as you probably know, that since that conjunction, okay, Pluto has lost 4/5 of its atmosphere. Now you've got a situation where Neptune's got 2 spots that are rotating in its opposite direction. Uranus is exploding X-rays that it never did before. Mars has moved 4 degrees, 4 inches off its axis. So when people just think there's alignment of 2 planets that doesn't have an impact, look around the solar system, it did. And of course, at that time, when that happened, a couple of days later, we had our 2 largest earthquakes, 9.6, followed by an aftershock of 9.7 in Antarctica. So that all of the planets felt it. And what we saw is we filmed at 7:37, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. 5 minutes after the ceremony started, a massive explosion of light that came out of Uluru for 1 second. We've got it on film. And it doesn't cover Uluru, and it would have gone around the world. And that was the moment when the switch came on and the world became cleansed. So yes, the old ones of the past knew about this. You're right.
But I mean, they have such a strong focus on the stars that I would imagine that, they would have a way of reading them.
And they would have been told about this too, Evan. They would have been told. The old ones were in contact. They were in contact with the beings from other places. There was an open contact for a long period of time. So, but the point with this was, and I was made clear from the beginning, if there were not enough people sending positive energy to the rock at that moment, nothing would have happened. And what we get today would have been our future. And nothing would have changed. It was the seminal point. And when people talk about whether extraterrestrials are here, really, even the Pentagon gave it up and said yes indirectly. It's really not going to have to do if, it's to do with why. Why did so many different beings spend so much time here and invest so much time with a group of squabbling apes fighting in the sandpit for 5,000-6,000 years? Why did they bother? That's the question. And the answer is Uluru on the 21st of December, because that was a chance, if there were enough people who were aware, and they were happy. We've got feedback. They could not believe it was somewhere between 15 to 20 million people, mainly in places in the world where it was nighttime. And remember, it was our summer and it was their winter. We had a big group in Iceland, didn't we?
They're in the snow
Hundreds.
with their shoes off, poor things.
Because they had to make contact with the earth. And went from people writing us from England saying, the earth is just frost at the moment, nice. But they did it. And they were really rapt that they did it. And their energy went into that particular moment. So, and as you know, all the scriptures talk about, what do they call it, a golden age? It doesn't matter. But it's basically a time for rebalancing the equation. Because in this planet, there's used to be a fine balance between good and evil. And it should have been balanced. It's not balanced. Evil has completely taken over everything. And that's why this reset was always a possibility. And that's why the Pleiadians put those crystals inside Uluru to assist in this change. And of course, the magic box that the elders spoke about was the whole rock itself. It wasn't just some people think it was a tiny little box that you could open. Well, that was okay to think that at the time, but we're being honest now. It was actually the rock itself. But that happened. And the elders from the past, and all of the scriptures talk about this time. Well, it was going to happen sometime. And honestly, if it doesn't happen now, there's no hope. It really is a time that's got beyond redemption. But they're going to continue doing this because the way they're going to play this is right to the finish. It will be the same. So what people have got to do is hang in there. Yeah, that's the trick.
Could you tell more about the magic box? Because it sounds like an Aboriginal Ark of the Covenant story, because we've seen, you've discovered old world connections with common origin connections with the gnostic gospels you've talked about earlier, and this and now a magical box.
Well, it's funny because we're told that. We were doing the last live speaking talk in Melbourne, because one day after it was lockdown, we just got out in time. And when we did talk the first day, we spoke about the fact it was Uluru. It was that one of the many people involved from Uluru sent us the words magic box. And Evan, you wrote back and said, we can't use that. And they said we could, didn't they?
Yeah.
But we did research on it and found out that it was given to another guy, wasn't it? Do you know his name?
Robert Coon.
Robert Coon, that's right. He was with the elders and they gave the term magic box, right? Now, I know recently the ABC put up and wrote about this and said it was a load of crap because it's a new age term, like we're saying there, and the original people wouldn't use it. Well, I'm sorry, they did. So it's an interesting term because what the hell does it mean? And the answer quite simply is this. We can't be fully sure what it is, can we?
No.
We know it was put inside Uluru. Whether we suspect there are Pleiadian crystals, which were used at Atlantis and then misused, but then used again and placed there. Well, that's not hard to prove because we proved that we've got 2 Atlantean rings that were placed here. We know that for a fact because we found them at Hill End. Whether that's from there, we don't know. Whether it is actually a box itself, we don't know. All we know is 2 things. Definitely the rock, 99% sure Pleiadian crystals. Past that, anything's open. But I can tell you, I was surprised we weren't going to use it because we just thought straight away, well, that comes straight out of Lord of the Rings. It's sort of that thing, like ring sign and stuff like that. And we weren't going to use it, but we were told to use it. And of course, the same person who told us later off was trying to attack us and kill us. But that's a different story again.
Yeah.
Because everything went crazy. The whole thing went crazy all the way through because this is such a big thing for this as big as we think it is. It basically sent people off in the most bizarre directions. We just weren't sure what was going to happen there because it was, if it was true, it was a large load to bear for the people doing the ceremony. And they were petrified that it was going to get ruined. And then they made the bold decision, just close the rock and throw everyone out for the full day and a half before and after. And that way they got their ceremony done. But we do know for a fact they didn't get them all out, did they?
No.
one of the people who was sort of trying to fight against them stayed in there, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter because there were 15 million people outside feeding that box. And the strange part is whatever it was, if you look at the last video we put up, there is a 1.5 second photograph taken by people at a different site to where we're doing our ceremony. And they told us two things. It is not a flash from behind, because there was no one taking the flash from behind. And when you look at the white, it covers the whole of the sky equally. There's no variation in intensity. It's completely the same. And it comes out of the rock. It doesn't cover the rock. So that was the moment where we knew that this had been successful. Now, we didn't see that. And by the way, the people filming it were just filming the rock. They never saw the light either. That's what you've got to remember. So you're seeing something that came out of that rock that the naked eye and traditional 5 senses or whatever we've got can't even see. It's that refined. So that's when you see that. If you doubt the prophecy, well, it becomes easy, really. And then on the last one, what I can share with you is what we're going to talk about is in the last film we've got of the UFO, we thought it disappeared the third time round. And then some people discovered it when they slowed down the film by 4 times the speed it was to 1/4 the speed. And you find what happens then is there's 4 frames per second. And on one of the frames, it's there. Then it's missing for 3 more, then it's there again. What I didn't realise, and I'm going to point out in the next time we do this, is the gap between those two is about 3 kilometres. So tell me, how can a plane be doing, or plane, which is what they called it, be doing around about 80 k's an hour like this, then disappear for 3 frames, reappear for 1, then move 3 k's in a second? You try and work out the speed that is, and also think about how quickly it got there in 1 second. Wow. That is unbelievable. And that means when we say they were there at that time watching that ceremony, we know they were because we filmed it. So yeah, the magic box, they knew about that too. And they knew that Uluru was going to heal the planet if it was turned on. But what it also means is those that were going to make sure this planet was going to be destructive or make it feel like it's just hell on earth, they're going to continue doing it. They won't stop. The terror campaign that's on every public media, there is no one in any political party or media outlet is telling anything but exactly the same story. That's never happened before. This is the first time there's been a major global issue where there are 2 sides and one side is not allowed to speak in any public forum. That's new. Now what they're doing in America, if you get a jab, you can win $1 million in a lottery. Ladies and gentlemen, you can win joints. You can win childcare. When did they ever do that before for any other disease? Never. You've got to wonder. And if I can, because I suppose we've got to finish soon, can I close with a comment about our leaders? It's to do with a survey that was done about 2 years ago, before that word starts with a C and ends with 19. And it was a survey of 100 occupations. And people, it was a very extensive one, it was done for quite some time, were asked to rank them. Politicians came 99th. Used car salesmen came 97th. Which means at that particular moment in time, humanity had more faith and trust in a used car salesman than they did in a politician. Now, I think all credit to humanity at that particular moment in time, because they'd woken up to what was going on. They had seen through their leaders. Soon after, it changed. And now if we get one of those same used car salesmen standing there and says, look what I'm doing, follow me, we do. And I would ask those people, can you not remember how little you trusted them with a car, but you will trust them with your life? I don't know. What I do know is that all the other vaccines had 6 years trials, not 6 minutes or 6 weeks or 6 days. And 6 weeks is the longest any of them got.
Wow.
But the point is, it's the people who are telling you to do it. Why do you trust them? You didn't before. Think back a year and a half ago when you thought, I don't believe a word you say, because that's what they said the problem was. I don't trust what they say. Now, everyone trusts what they say. And if you don't, you're a conspiratorist, aren't you? You're someone to be despised. I'm half waiting for them to suggest they put tattoos with numbers there. I know they did that before, didn't they?
Yes.
Was that in Nazi Germany?
It was, yes.
Oh, I couldn't be making that comparison. I forget that. I don't know why I think that was the same. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, and of course part of that story is that we can't tell the truth about our past. We're not allowed to, because that would be in the public interest. Yeah. But ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to, come along to the next show we're doing, because I think this is what, 13, is it? 12. Well, I'd say I had this belief from quite some time. We've done a lot of shows now, and I would say that our last one was in the top 3, and I've got a feeling this one's going to be in the top 3 again. We've got Ildi reporting in from Egypt. She was never meant to be Australia, was she?
No.
Poor Hungarian. She was always meant to be in Egypt. She's been there for a long time. She'll give you a fascinating story. She works with a Kemet school, and that's the real story about Egypt and how that comes on. Because we're doing monuments, and we've got some fantastic stone monuments. Evan's put up one there from the nightcap. That's part of that stone road that we were looking at. Yeah, I remember. There's the aqueduct up there too, Evan.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely be talking about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Some of the amazing things we've found in Australia. And so is Charles. He's going to be talking about stone monuments too, because they're an integral part of our past. They were the great memoirs of past life and past stories that they left behind for us. And look what we did to them all. But anyway, I'm looking forward to that. And thank you, Charles, for inviting us in for a conversation and chat. I'm sure, if you've got any other questions you want to ask us, mate.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's amazing what you were saying before about the relation of the dream time and the aboriginal magical practices with the sacred female standing on the mountain. And you found this connection in the gnostic-gospels. And in retrospect, it just sounds like the pyramid religion, where I've been finding that with pyramids, there's always a sacred female associated with the mountain. And I was wanting to ask you as well, because so I've got a theory that the pyramid is kind of a mother mountain to protect the country. And you mentioned earlier that that Uluru is going to save the world, or save humanity. Is this related to this old religion?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, the amount of Egyptian archaeology in this country is underestimated. Sir Grafton Elliott Smith, who was the first Australian to be knighted for his services to academia. We've got quotes, haven't we, Evan?
Yeah.
And we've shown people these quotes where he said, there's so much Egyptian stuff here, I can't keep up with it. In Australia, it's everywhere. So Frederick Slater will read from his notes. He will tell you the Egyptians came here to learn the secret arts, and they took them back. We've got quotes by people saying the Egyptian religion is identical to the dreaming and the pantheon of gods there. They're linking with other animals. The whole thing is exactly the same. We've got the top academics, the Grafton Elliott Smith, Frederick Slater, who was the Australian president of the Archaeological Society, have both made it clear. They talk about the link between Egypt and Australia. It is integral. In fact, it's well known. We know for a fact that people in Egypt have actually said, academics have said, we've got every right to set up an embassy in Australia. We were there before anyone else. And there was a treaty. We've actually seen it, haven't we?
Yeah.
We have seen a treaty tablet in hieroglyphs. It's held by a woman near Gosford. We've seen it. We've looked at it. We've picked it up. It's the Stela of Senebeth, but it's the original version. It's not the same as the one that's in the museum. It's got the same markings in it. It was found inside a convict building between the walls. It was hidden in there, and the building was made in 1796, just after whitefellas got there. And it was a convict And it was hidden inside there. And when they destroyed it, when they pulled the building down, they found it between there. Now, some people have compared it to Stela of Senoveth that was found in 1850. This was found in 1796. So it's earlier. So, ladies and gentlemen, yes, Egypt and Australia, the Standing Stone site, they found an Egyptian boat there. In fact, one of the pictures we've got is of the water beneath the Standing Stone site with a wrecked Egyptian boat, haven't we? Mm-hmm. So the link between Australia and Egypt is incredibly strong. It's deep at the deepest level, at the highest level, at the level of the temple at the court, because Nefertejeb and Nefertari who came here, and I've got the bone of Nefertari, I'm sure it's his bone, they were the preferred sons of Khufu. And Nefertari was the spiritual one, and he smuggled on aboard apparently. So yes, the Egyptian link is ongoing. In fact, I've been told by elders the Egyptians were here continually from 4600 BC until 400 BC. There was always Egyptians here. And what happened is, the story is, this comes from Wangari, and respected elder, I can use his name because he told me this story and I've told before. Some Egyptians came here 400 years ago, but they were not like the ones from 4,600 years ago. Things had changed a bit. And when you come to Sydney, if you're coming from Egypt, that takes you inland. And they went into the middle, into Pitchinjat Jara country, and it was there they stole 3 stones. One of the ones I showed you was one of those types of stones. And he described what they look like, but I'm not allowed to say that aloud. But they were special stones. And they tracked them all the way back to Balmoral in Sydney. And as they got near the boat, they came out and speared them all to death and told the Egyptians never to come back. And that was the last time they came here. So they were here continually for 4,200 years. So yes, there is what I would call the strongest link the original people have with any other group that isn't of their same genetics are the Egyptians. And the Egyptians had a treaty, which was, unfortunately, when they said it wasn't continual. It finished 400 years ago when they broke the law. But for 4,200 years, they had rights of passage here. And they could set up buildings. We've been to a place where they set them up, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
In the Blue Mountains. And it got blown up. We don't know how, but that's a different story. So they lived here with permission, and they learned, and there was interaction for a long period of time, and it stopped 400 years ago. So yeah, there has been that story.
Wonderful, wonderful. It makes sense as well. I mean, the boomerangs and all the other things. I mean...
And the tomb of, Tutankhamun, the grandson of who? Khufu. See, of course it makes sense. And the gold in there, some of that gold comes from Australia. It's been signatured as coming from Australia. Of course there's a link. The Egyptians know this. A lot of their academics know it, by the way. They don't argue the point. We've got great response and rapport with many academics who are following us on our Facebook, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they're the top level. We don't have a problem with the Egyptians. They know it's true. Our problem is with people you went to school with. We just can't get through to them.
All righty. So, we've got a conference coming up. The website is Forgotten Origin.
Yeah. If you want tickets to the conference, it's ouralienancestry.net, and look for Chapter 12. That's the one that we're all speaking on next weekend. The replay for Chapter 11's there as well, which was the last one. So,
very good, that one. Highly commended to you. Yep.
But I think we're going to have a good day on Sunday.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah. It's going to be really good.
Fun. That's the whole point of it, yeah. And people can make comments on the side. And if anyone does want to ask Mesref a question, buy a ticket and send us an email. We'll compile them. If we only get 2 responses, they're sweet. And if it's more than 2, if there's more than 2 responses, it wasn't my fault. It was Evan's fault. He only picked 2, and the ones that weren't picked, I was backing you, Mob. So blame him for that.
It's always my fault.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so and I'll be speaking as well. I hope my talk will be almost as good as yours about a lost civilization in Western Victoria on the plains, and some geomancy as well, how they laid it out and where it was sort of located, and near some volcanoes. And yeah, we'll have a great time. I'm really looking forward to it. You mentioned that Hungarian lady will talk. Leah will talk as well, I guess, because she's always in there as well. So 4 speakers. So everyone get your tickets. And let's wrap it up. And thanks so much. It's been an honor to listen to all this amazing stuff from you two. And we'll talk soon.
Okay,
Sounds
mate.
great.
Thanks for that. I
Thank you.
appreciate it big time.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
Thanks for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.